At American University, we don't just hope for change, we create it. We don't just dream of a better world, we make it a reality. With a graduate degree from AU, you'll access expert faculty and connections throughout DC to develop skills and experience to turn your passion into purpose. And that purpose can make all the difference in your career. Discover the difference a degree makes at american.edu/grad school.
You are listening to New Theory Radio. Theory Radio.
Hello and welcome to another edition of New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk Socket 960 AM. My name is Nav Nanwa. I am your host, and this is the show we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. Happy Family Day to you and yours this weekend, as I hope you're having a wonderful time with your loved ones. And I hope you're somewhere comfy and ready to enjoy another episode of NTR, as it is, as always, a very jam-packed episode. We are going to be talking to a number of different individuals and theorizing about a bunch of different topics. First and foremost, we are going to be joined by three amazing local artists that are going to be performing at the Brampton's very own In the Skin concert, which is taking place at the Rose Theater on Thursday, February 20th. I have joining me singer Anika Marie, as well as two New Theory Radio alumnus, Zenesoul and Reeko Rieffe. And all three of these individuals will be performing at the showcase. And I got to sit down with them and talk about Black History Month and get their theories on different aspects of Black History Month and what it means to be an artist of color. Now, the one thing that's been very noticeable, not just to myself, but to a lot of people, is the heavy emphasis that we've been seeing in the media over the last few years when it comes to really celebrating Black History Month here in Canada. And it's definitely refreshing. But I wanted to get all three of their theories as to why it's taken so long to actually bring a lot of these figures and a lot of this information to the forefront. Because I don't know about you, but I was never taught a lot about this in grade school. Neither were the three that I have on, and you'll hear within the conversation itself, because spoiler alert, it was pre-recorded, that it's somewhat refreshing, but also surprising that it has taken so long to really recognize a lot of these individuals. And not only do we get into a conversation and some theories on that, but we also talk about other things such as systemic racism. Yes, it exists all around us. It's also very familiar, considering the fact that the city of Toronto is actually looking to make mental health resources for Black youth more possible. And the reason why they're doing that is because they've noticed a lot of systemic racism that's taken place when it comes to Black youth seeking mental health help. And a lot of great nuggets in this conversation. I urge you to check it out as we get super honest and super deep as to what it truly means to be dealing with various issues when you are a person of color. And then I'm going to be joined by a comedy legend here within Canada, someone who's been in Harold and Kumar, used to be on YTV as well, used to be on This Hour, has 22 minutes on CBC. It is the legend himself, Shaun Majumder, will be calling into the show. He also has a performance coming up at the Rose Theater. This episode is very Rose Theater heavy, so shout outs to the wonderful team at the Rose. His show is taking place on February 22nd. It is a part of his tour, the Hate Tour, where he really dives deep into different topics of hate, whether it be prejudice, whether it be just how people get offended nowadays in the comedy world. And we get really deep with Shaun. Shaun's a fantastic individual. He's been in the Canadian industry for quite some time. He's definitely had a lot of great experiences, and we talk just about that. We talk about the role hate has in comedy and whether people should be taking it seriously. We talk about cancel culture. We talk about a lot of different topics, and it's surely a great preview for his show that's taking place on the 22nd at the Rose. And we're also going to be giving away tickets to that show, so keep it locked to our social media, as we will have more information on how we will be giving away those tickets at the end of today's episode. And then we wrap up this week's episode by talking about diversity in newsrooms. And joining me to talk about that in more detail is Anita Li, who is the founder of the Canadian Journalists of Color Association, as well as Nadia Stewart, who is a part of the Canadian Association of Black Journalists. Both individuals spearheaded a wonderful manifesto that really calls out more diversity that's needed within newsrooms across the media landscape here in Canada. And it's a very fascinating conversation and look as to why diversity is needed when it comes to telling the news or when it comes to putting certain stories out there. And both share some wonderful experience on both personal and professional when it comes to this topic. And I know each and every one of you will definitely appreciate it as we get deep into what it truly means to have a diversified newsroom and what that impact could be to Canada if that was to happen. It is definitely a jam-packed episode here on New Theory Radio, so we are going to take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, we are going to be joined by Anika Marie, Zenesoul and Reeko Rieffe, and we are going to talk Black History Month here on News Talk Saga 960.
Theory Radio.
And we're back here on New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk Saga 960 AM. My name is Nav Nanwa. I am your host, and this is the show where we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. And I'm super excited to welcome my first guest. I have joining me as part of the In the Skin Sound and Soul concert that's taking place in conjunction with Brampton's very own and the Rose Theatre. I have 3 artists that are going to be performing on February 20th at the Rose Theatre. Going to be 3 amazing artists that honestly are really pushing the culture forward when it comes to what it means to be from the city. I got in front of me Anika Marie. What's up?
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you? Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having us. I think this is dope.
I'm excited. I wish I pressed record earlier because I think you were making a lot of good points. But
I know. I'm always ready.
And then sitting beside you, I got a New Theory alum, someone that I had actually on my first, I think the first time I brought the show to radio, she was one of the first guests I had on. It is the lovely Zenesoul. Zen, welcome back.
Hey, it's nice to be back.
Yeah, I'm glad you're alive. We'll talk more about that a little later.
Don't kill me right now.
And last but not least, I got another individual that was on the inaugural Saga 960 New Theory Radio episode. He is someone that's truly killing the hip hop scene right now, reps Brampton to the fullest, and he's definitely making waves. It is Reeko Rieffe. Reeko, thanks so much for coming through, man.
Happy to be here, man. Super happy to be here.
Yeah, it's been a while, man. It's good to see all the wonderful work that all of you guys are doing. This is an exciting showcase taking place on February 20th. And, honestly, one of the main importance around this showcase is really around kind of celebrating Black excellence as well as Black History Month. And one of the topics I wanted to talk about was really around Canadian Black history. Now, being someone who's very in tune with the news and different media, what I truly love nowadays is just the emphasis that's being put on Black history within Canadian media. Like, you turn on the sports channels, they're doing Black history features on athletes that you probably had no idea who they were, but they really pushed boundaries and really did their part to separate the barriers and to be big deals and within their sort of disciplines. You're starting to see a lot of it in the media world. You're starting to see big companies really embracing Black history. But my confusion really lies around the fact that why wasn't this really celebrated before. Like, I almost feel like a lot of Black History Month was always overshadowed by what we see in the U.S. And maybe that's because some people consider Canada as being a U.S. junior to an extent. But, let's get your thoughts, and I'd love to get your theories on that. And Anika, I think you were very vocal about this when we were talking about this off air. Do share some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I was just saying before we went on air that I feel like a lot of the times Black history is watered down here in Canada. Sorry.
It's okay.
So why a lot of things that we were learning about now that we didn't before, I think there's a lot of pressure. What do you think? Like, I feel like there's a lot of pressure for society, or not society because that's us, but like the people above.
Yeah.
To kind of show that they care.
Yeah. Especially like, to me, like, I think since, and this always kind of goes back to when Trump was elected in the US, I feel like nowadays people don't really have a filter anymore regarding their real feelings. And maybe before that they did.
Yeah.
I don't know, Zen, you kind of told us a really shocking story about your experience performing at the Brampton City Hall flag raising for Black History Month.
Yeah.
You don't have to share it, but that just, to me, I'm not totally surprised by it.
You're not?
Like, it's nuts. Like, it's
because people are blatant and blunt
They
and
are.
rude, and it has a lot to do with Donald Trump now being this guy.
Yeah, it
with
gives
so
them
much
permission.
power. It literally gives them permission.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, well, I'm gonna be backed up if I call this person an N-word. So let me just do it.
It's nuts. It's nuts. Zen, what are your thoughts?
Trump is really giving them like the platform to feel like they don't have to hide anymore. They don't have to cover up the way they feel. They can just say it, and that's why he got elected in the first place. All the people that have been just chilling in the background, they saw someone who was gonna voice how they felt. And they're like, my vote's going for him.
Oh man, no, that's a good point. Rico, do you got any thoughts on this, man?
I agree with Zen for sure.
Yeah.
The whole issue, like the root of the cause, is that there's already people that feel that way, anyways. I mean, so if as long as there's somebody up there that could, like she said, back their opinion.
Yeah. With all this awareness that's being showcased across Canadian media or Canadian institutions around Black history, do you feel like a lot of it's like authentic? Like, do you feel good about it?
To be honest, I didn't even know all of this was happening until
Really,
you started telling me.
Wow. Okay, well, that's telling.
I don't really watch TV much.
Nobody watches TV.
Exactly. So it's like,
it's just me. I'm just dating myself. It's okay.
Literally like we're not even seeing all of this as happening. I didn't know it was happening. But to be honest, Canada's always late to the party anyways.
Yeah.
So it's like America is putting Black History Month on like a pedestal now.
Yeah.
And now it's like Canada, it's our turn. We have to start. Like Google did that big thing where they showed like all the Black people doing
that were
big
Googled.
things. Yeah, the Googled the most and all of that.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay,
was
they
cool.
started that, and now Canada's gonna just jump on board like we always do.
It feels good to see things like that. Like the Google thing, I felt that in my heart.
Yeah,
I was like,
good.
all right, you're done now. Like, put us on, like, for real. I felt it. I felt as if there were Black people in the room.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of commercials and stuff that we see, and like maybe, we kind of twitch a little bit because we don't see the authenticity, and maybe that's because there's not enough Black people in that room, like not just delegating but sharing their input. Okay, maybe this is off-putting, try this,
Yeah no, that's a fair point, because like it's kind of similar. Like, well, nowadays I find that because of Black History Month, it's really opened a lot of people's eyes in regards to celebrating other ethnicities. So now there's like a South Asian Heritage Month that we get, I believe in May. I think I should know this. Unfortunately, I don't. Oh god, I might have to edit that out, or whatever. I'll keep it in. But again, for me, like, I'm not this is gonna sound super controversial, but I'm not really a big fan of the months, because I'm like, why do we have to just choose a month and be like, we're gonna be celebrating?
Yeah.
And
trust me. And then the conversation's always, okay, why do we gotta get the shortest month?
I told you, Anika's perfect for this conversation.
But it's true. We all think it. Maybe I just voice it.
Yeah. No, but
More, but
it needs to be voiced, right?
Yeah,
because then,
for sure.
like, I find that, like, I'm not too sure what the origin of really Black History Month was, but you would think
I
that.
think it was like a pity party, to be honest.
You think so? You think so? Yeah.
For sure.
They were complaining too much, and they're like, "All right, here,
Give them something.
here, bro."
Yeah.
Right. Same with how like when they say how, you know, slavery ended.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, yeah.
It didn't really
Like,
end. Like,
they
you know
just
what I mean?
changed.
Yeah,
the
we
way-
don't buy
Yeah.
people now,
Yeah.
but we're still going to put them in, you know, we're not going to allow them in certain spaces, really.
like hockey.
Well, and that was that Anika, that
And then-
story you shared. I should have pressed record
I know.
before.
It was raw. It was,
That story you shared was insane. Like,
Yeah,
but
my
it's something that I can resonate with, because there were people in my immediate network that were playing hockey that were people of color that was totally discouraged.
they really didn't fit in.
They didn't
to
fit
the
in.
culture.
Yeah.
And they didn't feel like they belonged. I feel like with us as Black people, and colored people,
Yeah.
we always have to adapt.
No, we do.
And it's a natural thing for us to adapt,
Yeah.
right? So when we're put in white spaces where we already have to adapt, and then, you know, I'm here just as talented and skilled as you are in this,
Yeah.
but, you know, they don't really like a lot like that. The whole idea of whiteness isn't like, I feel like they don't know how to, it's not a thing where
They're actually
like,
going to
all
include
over my
people, I guess, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think they do it on purpose. I don't think it's a thing where it's
Definitely
done
not on purpose.
Yeah.
I just feel like
Some people, yeah, but
some people for
most
sure.
people, it's
Oh,
not
yeah,
on
majority I
purpose.
don't think it's perfect. I just think they
Yeah.
just really don't know how.
Yes, and that's what it is.
It's like a psychological
How do
thing.
you do what you always do with somebody who does not look like us? Like,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
That's like the issue that they kind of
Yeah.
they struggle with. You know what I mean?
No, I totally agree. Like, it's like psychological in a way.
Yeah.
Where it's
like I've never had to think about
like
this
that,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's hard.
now
And
all
lot
of a
people are
sudden have
scared
to
too. That's a God honest truth. Like a lot of them are scared. Like they don't want to put themselves in that situation and do it the wrong way.
Yeah,
So
and
they
then
just
be
avoid
looked
it.
at as that they're racist or
Exactly.
this
Yeah.
or that.
Wow.
So they just avoid it all in all. You know.
Yeah.
Tough one.
No, straight up.
Yeah.
What in your eyes does the term "in the skin" mean to you? Like that, I find that to be the most intriguing. And I should probably ask Sade this question, but she's not in the studio with us. But I find that phrase to be very thought provoking, especially with some of the things that you do see in media, especially as being artists. Like artists being an artist of color, like there's a lot of pressure, number one, put on you in regards to being
There's
able
a
to break
box
through.
you're expected to be in.
There's a box you're expected to be in. There's like a lot that's expected of you that's not necessarily expected of everybody else. So I'd love to just go around, and maybe Rieko will begin with you. Like, what does that term really mean? Like, in this skin, like, how do you embrace it and how do you celebrate it when it comes to your art?
I think in the skin is just like, you know, us at our purest form doing like, you know, what we do.
Yeah.
I think it's just like in the skin for me is you in your purest form.
Deep.
You know, I really that's
feel
why
that.
you know when she told me about the event, like I really want to do it. And then it's like sound and soul, like it's like literally us in our purest form doing
Yeah.
what we do. It's our culture. You know what I mean? So that's my take on it.
I like that. I like that. Zen, what about you?
To me, in the skin is deeper than just our skin. Like what we are inside and who we are.
Ooh.
That's just
I
what
feel like you
take
had
in.
that rehearsed.
No, I did not.
She's just waiting for me to ask that.
No.
That's hilarious.
Well, that's deep though.
Anika, what about you? You're pondering right now.
Yeah, because I never thought about it. I really like
I
the
didn't
title.
think about it either. It's all right now. I'm like, what the heck?
Like in this skin, it's like being a visible minority. And that word even, like, we're not really a minority anymore.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Anika has a lot to get off her chest.
Hey, this New Theory Radio is just that. Say your piece.
You have to walk in the world a little different.
Yeah.
I feel like, or not that we have to, but I feel like psychologically, you know, we think about different things. So I feel like in our skin or in this skin, it's like our journey through life in our lens.
That's deep. I like that.
You like that? Snap?
We got everybody in the room snapping.
Yeah, slip.
No, but
That's how I feel.
that's where I was, like, when I first saw the title, like that's what really resonated with me too, is, you know, nowadays I think growing up you get oblivious, especially when you grow up in a city like Brampton and you're surrounded by other people that may look like you or have the same struggles as you. You get oblivious about thinking about what people are perceiving of you. Sometimes you're just kind of going with your life, do your thing, don't really think about that. But then when you have a situation where you encounter someone that's discriminatory or that's going to make a comment or like indirectly kind of leave you out of a situation,
it kind of shakes your world.
It does. It
really
does.
does.
Yeah. I still remember like something as small as like me, my brother, my dad going out to Barrie because he had an appointment. Like my dad had an appointment out there, and we just went to a Harvey's, and we were the only colored people in that Harvey's. And I felt weird. Like I felt the eyes looking at us like, yo, where'd these brown people come from? Like we're not used to seeing this. Like I can't imagine just some of the struggles that occur on a daily basis for people, right?
Yeah. And that's what it is, right? It's like that undertone feeling that's not really spoken about. But I'm sure we've all felt that way, whether it's like, you know, my hair is a certain way. I know they're looking at me crazy. They don't understand. Or like, you know,
the hair thing is just annoying.
it is.
That's just
That's
annoying.
a whole other like.
Like how'd you do it? Like you
wash
don't know
your
by
hair?
now.
How do you
You
wash
really
it?
don't know by now. How many people have you met? Like,
And it's funny, like it's comical, right? But it's an extra thing that we have to think about.
Yeah.
yo, I had a friend. Before she started her job, she was like, my hair didn't come yet. I wanted the hair that's like right at my shoulder because that's the hair I want to wear regularly to work so that I don't have to switch my hair
And answer those questions.
Because every time I walk in, it's like they're like, "Oh my gosh!" Like it's a party, and she's like, "It doesn't make me feel nice at all.
Oh
like
my
it
God.
singles me out." And I'm
Yeah.
like, I know exactly how you feel. Like sometimes I consider, do I want to change my hair? Because do I want to hear that right now? Like,
yeah.
And that's nuts because you're, you know, for in that instance, like you're not even like thinking about being the center of attention. You're probably just
No,
thinking about
I
being
don't
comfortable.
want to be like,
Like it's okay. Okay. Yep. I have a new hairstyle. Compliment it. Yeah, I look cute for sure. Thanks so much. Right.
don't make it a big deal.
But now you're making it a big deal.
Yeah.
And now you're asking me all these deep questions like, shall I pull up a YouTube video?
how long it took me to do it?
Oh my God.
Was my ass hurting?
It's a whole conversation. Yep.
Oh man.
But I work with kids,
Yeah.
so they'll ask me questions, and I'll sit them down and I'll have a whole conversation. Just because they're kids, it's a genuine, you know, they really want to know.
yeah.
Start them young.
No,
So this is a wig.
That's why Hair Love won the Academy Award. That's why Hair Love won the Academy Award, because it's a great way to start the conversation.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I think it's important, and again, I think it's important when you distinctively look different than somebody else, that at a young age you understand why.
Yeah.
Like I think there's,
It is, yeah.
and again, it's not to discredit parents and how they parent and like their kids growing up, but it's more so around just like making them more self-aware. Like
Yeah.
it's like I always laugh when I watch like Dave Chappelle, and he was like the like white black supremacist, right? Like he was blind, like he never knew who he actually was, and then he was a white supremacist, and then it was like an inside joke, and it was such a funny skit. But it just showed that how people can be oblivious to just who they are on a daily basis. Like that's why I think it's so important. I'm glad that you do that, Anika. I think it's
Thank
important.
you.
Rico, has anyone ever done anything about your hair?
No. I think I do a good job of making sure people know I don't want to talk.
Okay.
Wow.
I love it. It's just so mysterious.
Okay, I need to be quiet because
Gotta be quiet,
I'm
man.
over it.
Keep your headphones in. You always keep your headphones in, they'll know better. Like,
Yeah, man. I probably shouldn't disclose this, but that's my trick at work now. I won't even put music on. I'll just have the headphones on.
I can hear everything. I can hear everything. Because I want to know what's going on. I just don't want to talk.
Yeah.
So,
And there was one time where someone's like, "Oh, I can't talk to Nav. He's busy right now." I'm like,
Wow.
"Thank
This
God."
is great. Yo, trust me. Wow.
It's the best. It's the best
Or I'll
trick.
put the headphones in. Like, I'm weird though. I talk to myself sometimes, like just to like get my thoughts together.
Yeah.
So I'll keep my headphones in to make it seem as if I'm on the phone.
Yeah.
But I'm like really just talking out my day.
No, people don't care. They see me in my headphones, they still disturb me.
Really? eh?
Tap you on the shoulder.
Oh.
Bro, I have to always be like, yeah. Like,
That's the
I'm
worst.
over
You're
it.
pausing your music.
You got the
like-
over the ears. Like, yo, I'm listening to something, please.
I need to stop smiling, even though apparently I have like a mean face. I need to stop
And then
smiling.
you know what?
Screwface Capital. It's okay.
No, that's so deep too. Like, I feel like if I'm not like in a joyous mood,
Oh my
which
god.
you don't have to be in
Yeah,
all the time.
yeah.
There's not a lot to be happy about. Right? Let's keep it real.
Actually, just adds a clap to it. I love it.
And you know, like if I'm not smiling, I'm probably this, or
moody.
she's probably this, and it's like, no, I'm just focused.
Yeah.
And there's no reason for me to smile right now, like, period.
And then they got you in that archetype until she's like an angry black woman.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like it's crazy. It's crazy how that happens. Or when they see like a black man getting worked up, it's like, oh, he's just getting worked up. Like that's just who he is. Like it's
the Stank B name.
Yeah.
You don't hear it for any white person.
No,
it's
you
always
don't.
a black person.
And like the whole like thing that you were saying about men, black men, and how it's always, you know, if they're expressing how they feel, it can be in a very mature professional manner. It's still like, whoa.
Yeah, it's like, oh, where did that come from, man? Like,
were you gonna say something?
I was agreeing.
Yeah, right. And I feel like I have a brother who's kind of like you, where it's like, I want to be right under the radar. Like, I don't want to be seen. Like, nobody asks me no questions, because like I don't know if what I'm going to say is off-putting, or like I don't know if you're coming to me with a genuine vibe. Yeah, you know. Yeah. And I think that's really sad that you kind of have to walk with that. It's not like heavy,
no, definitely
right?
not.
But it's still an added thing that you have to think about.
how much of that do you think is because of just the culture we've grown up in, and just like TV characters and movies and
all of that?
Yeah.
That's what your perception is from a kid. Like, you know, it's what people tell you and what you see.
Yeah.
Even us as black people, we've also like embodied all of that too. Like
Yeah.
we see that, and when we like, you could be scared of another black person, even though you're black, just because of what you've seen on
what
TV
you see,
growing up.
like all that, and that's actually a great sort of segue, because I don't know if you guys like heard, but like the city of Toronto is on this initiative right now where they're trying to make more mental health resources available for young black youth. And they found out that there are a lot of black youth that don't get the services because people assume that they don't need them. Which, if you think about sort of the culture we have in the city, and it's not just within Toronto, but it's all over, like the gang culture and all that, like there's clearly like a lot of youth out there that need the help, or need at least some type of guidance or some type of assistance to allow them to rehabilitate and actually get back into society. And it's just, to me, it was just fascinating that a major city like Toronto has to create an initiative like that, when you get like Bell Let's Talk, and there's all these big initiatives about let's talk about mental health, but then even within that space there's discrimination.
Yeah, that's like, so true.
That's so disheartening, man. Like, I don't know.
I think it's, at first I was kind of like, I don't know why I was a little bit offended at first. Yeah. But when you really think about it, it's good to have those spaces. Okay, so now if these mental health resources, so say there's therapy now, are there going to be black therapists? You know, like, is there going to be people that look like us that we're going to?
Yeah, because you know, and indirectly it kind of opens up opportunity.
Right.
Like, how comfortable
for black therapists
they are. Yeah, like even in speaking from the South Asian community standpoint, there's a lot of people that don't choose to get the help because they probably can't speak the language. It's tough to talk to some cultural barriers.
Part of the culture, like they look at it like mental illness is not a thing, or it's not something talked about. We tend to like sweep things under the rug. So it's like we don't go to.
They say 45% of people have mental health issues.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, we all go through it.
It's real.
That's a lot.
It's really real.
Population.
Yeah, it's almost half.
A lot, bro.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
And the black community definitely does.
Automatically.
We deal with trauma from the moment we're born.
That's what I was gonna say.
Into the world, like,
that's what I was gonna say.
You grow up different. You know what I mean? That stuff, it messes with your head. Like, it's only now, like, I've been reading a lot of books and stuff, and I'm starting to see like, how messed up my lens is. Like,
really,
I went to this like seminar or group. I don't know what it was. It was called Let Black Men Speak, and basically like these two guys, their friend who was a pastor committed suicide.
Oh my god!
They come together like every month, every quarterly, I think it is. Quarterly, they come together just to talk.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like I remember he was asking people, and so it's like first of all, it's like 30 black men in a room, and they're all vulnerable. Like I never seen anything like that.
Wow,
it's beautiful, you know. But he asked a question. He's like, finish the sentence. So he said, by the age of 40, a black man will. And he said, finish the sentence. You know, these guys are saying like,
Wow.
have a family. This guy's saying, oh, own a business. This guy's saying whatever. Like the first thing I thought of was have dead friends.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So being in that room,
Yeah.
hearing everybody's answers, and then like I'm like, why do my brain go to that? Like, you know what I mean?
And again, it's just like you're almost a product of your environment.
That's what I'm
like,
trying to say.
Yeah.
It's my lens is so tainted. So I feel like a lot of the black youth, like their lenses, it's not that they don't want to. It's not that they don't. It's that they really
They don't see it. They can't see it.
They don't see, you know, and there's not really anybody to tell them. Like it's by chance I ended up in that room that I just was like, wow, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
How did it make you feel like walking out the room?
It was dope for me because, like I said, I never seen that many black men in a room just talking about their feelings ever in my life.
That's actually
Like,
a
that's
dope
crazy.
experience.
Yeah.
That helps,
It's
man.
crazy.
That helps.
Crazy.
We actually did an episode, a mental health episode a few weeks ago. We actually did like a live show at the studio, and I had like people that I didn't even know that had any mental health issue like approach me after me like, yo, I really appreciate the conversation. And I think that's what needs to happen. Like I think you need to get these people in a room and be like,
Just talk.
Just talk. It doesn't have to be deep. It'll get deep, but it doesn't have to be like, okay, guys, we're about to have this deep
It's crazy
conversation.
how much you don't know how much you
Because
have.
then we're going to be like, all right, I'm out.
you can't force it, right? Like it's just like in some ways it's like the topic we just talked about when it comes to like black history. Like you can't just force it upon people like all of a sudden we're going to be super inclusive and just start talking about the people that have paved the way. Like do that, but find a more authentic way to do it. That's just my thought. Do you guys have any Canadian black heroes? Any that come to mind?
even know
Who laughed?
any
Somebody
of them.
laughed.
It was
Chess.
me
Great.
because I don't know any black hero
Wow.
in Canada.
Yep, the kids at school, they're
Not
doing
gonna lie.
projects. And so they're like, yeah, like I'm going to do mine on Nina Simone. She's Canadian, right?
Because of the
I'm
money.
like, I'm like, no, she's not Canadian. They're like, yeah, it has to be a Canadian person. Can you help me out? And I was like, let me check Google because I really don't know. I know about the Viola Desmond lady, but that's only because she's on the $5 bill.
Yeah.
Well, just on that, there's another story about how in BC there's a group that's trying to fight for Black history to be part of like the education curriculum, which I think is amazing because, like, and again, I think that opens the door for other stories because, again, just kind of using my perspective as being someone who's South Asian, like outside of my parents, like I never thought that there were South Asian people in Canada in the 1920s, 30s, 40s. But then I stumbled upon photos and there were people and I'm like,
True.
and it's because I never knew.
Because you guys came from.
Yeah. I always thought everyone immigrated here like in the 80s when
Honestly.
Pierre Trudeau opened up the barriers, right? Like
Don't kill me.
that's what I thought.
We're honestly so into the U.S. stories and culture that we don't know the Canadian culture or stories at
And it's
all.
forced on us, though.
I don't know
forced
anything
on us.
about Canadian Black history. I didn't even know
Me either, to be
there
honest.
was much.
I just recently
lie.
found out, oh my gosh, this might be crazy to say, the Underground Railroad came to Canada.
Oh,
Really?
yeah.
I knew that one.
It came to Canada.
Nav is like, really?
I never knew that.
Vancouver?
Was it Vancouver?
It was either Vancouver or Nova Scotia, but I do know.
Oh, it's
From
probably
reading the
Nova
book in
Scotia
Negroes.
because that's where all the Scotians.
Right. Yep, the Scotians were the first black. I don't know if they were first black slaves to come or the first black free, the first free blacks to come. Were
Wow.
the Scotians, but yeah, something like that. And that was only because I read the Book of Negroes, which is actually written by a Canadian author.
I've been reading the Book of Negroes, but I keep stopping.
Keep going.
Like I haven't had time to finish it.
Is it because like it's very deep or
I'm waiting for the story.
Yeah, some stuff.
It takes a while.
Okay, true. That's so funny that's your experience because for me, like, I read into things.
Yeah.
So, like, after every couple pages,
it's
I was
good
like,
still. It's actually good, but like I want to just find out what happens at the end. And then
true.
read it. Like
It's
I
the
want
story,
to
though,
hear
Zen. It's the story.
I know, but I want to hear the good part. I want to hear like what good comes out of this story because
True.
it's just like sad.
It is very sad,
Like, it's
yeah.
just something sad
Trust
each
me.
second. So it's
Yeah.
like I want to know what the ending is saying.
Yeah.
Does she get freedom?
yeah.
So like I keep stopping. 'cause I
But the
just
thing,
can't.
and that's the funny thing about it, right? It was always a fight. It was a constant
Something
fight. It
every
wasn't
day.
like you know, there were happy moments for sure, but
barely. It didn't
they
even
were
last.
not free, right? So they had to sneak to do things, and then they got, you know what I mean? Like, it was always something that to bring them back to that
remind
place.
them, to remind them.
Right, exactly. So
Yeah. I definitely gotta check
Canadians.
that out. No, but
No, read it. It's actually
It's a
good.
Didn't it turn into a movie? Is it a movie?
They did
Yes,
turn
it
into a
is,
movie.
but I don't want to watch the movie before I read the book.
if you read
movie
the-
sad stuff.
it's a good way to go.
you
about it.
watched it,
Yeah,
eh?
movie sad.
They added some things that aren't in the book, and then they
yeah, they
took
have
a
to,
lot from the book out.
Especially when you think about the history of
did
the
have to.
Atlantic Canada and the way they've treated the black population out there. Like it's crazy. Like it's nuts to see that actually happened. Like there's that one perception that Canada has where it's like, hey, it never happens in Canada. We all love each other
yeah,
out
they
here.
think
But
Happens quietly,
Yeah.
man.
if you go deep into it, like the Underground Railroad, talking about like slavery and the impact it has. Like if you go into Canadian history, it does get a little ugly.
Even in my grandma's building, she lives in a an elderly's like home residence, and even then, like, she'll blatantly say like, yeah, my neighbor's racist. She looks at me and literally she'll tell me things about how she feels about me, right? And these are like, you know, 70, 80-year-olds. So like, even hearing that, like the boldness in the elderly.
I expect the elderly to be bold,
that's
though.
real.
Because
That's
they're
real.
like, well,
Years of
my
racism.
time has passed.
So let me say what I really gotta say.
You're not changing that.
I want to see an elderly person talk like that. That'll make my life.
I'm about to cut. Like, I'm about to cut. Let me see what's on my
Speak my
chest,
piece,
yo.
like speak your hell. But
But honestly, it's the importance
You're
of
a war.
actually you need to talk to your elders, man. They've just gone through so much, especially the ones that have been to Canada, like, and they came here in the 50s and 60s, and like those are the ones that have the true stories. Like I still hear about people in my culture that had to, like, as soon as they showed up, they had to cut their hair.
Yes.
They had no choice.
Yeah.
Like, and they were really religious back home, but they had to do it to even get by. So it's
Yeah.
nuts.
It's
Trust me.
crazy all the things like these elderlies have gone through in their lifetime. And it's like for them to have computers and all of that right now, and
Yeah.
it's like, whoa, like
Yeah.
it's mind blowing sometimes when you
It
think
is.
about it, because it's like where they came from to where they're at now, bro.
Yeah, and like I would say for my grandma, she coming from Jamaica to Canada and having to, you know, kind of blend in and adapt. Her thinking is really kind of twisted for me looking at it now, because she'll be like, Anika, if you bring a man home, make sure he's either white or Asian.
What?
She'll say things like that, and she'll be like, she'll be like, I don't want no, you know, dirty skin boy. And dirty skin boy, she'll mean like a very dark skinned man.
Really?
And so literally, she was born and raised in Jamaica, and then coming here, you know, she's realizing
Being lighter all of a sudden equates to being more accepted.
Yeah.
Right. Which is a weird analogy, but it's
So
something
weird.
that's been ingrained in that generation. Like I see it a lot in my culture too.
Yeah.
Like it's,
Even
it's
last names.
Yeah.
People are like purposely designing their names and last names a certain way so that when they look at their resume, they think there's someone they're not.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Resume whitening is real.
oh gosh,
Super
yeah.
real. I know some people that do that. Like literally. Sorry, as we get all coming on my brother's computer. I know people that literally do that because they like my last name's too long.
Yeah,
Or no
exactly.
one can pronounce it.
They're gonna just pass it, right?
They
Even
change
my-
their first names, everything. It's nuts.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I have a South Asian friend, and she has really dark skin. And growing up, her grandma would try to bleach her skin.
Wow.
Like
Really?
would really try to have that because
Yeah.
she wanted better for her daughter. She felt like you know, you need to be lighter. You're not gonna get married and things like that.
Yeah.
So colorism is in multiple cultures. So I feel you on that.
Yeah.
And then you said I don't know. You're just talking about some. Dang.
Well, on that note, we do got to end this segment.
Okay.
But no, I feel like we can do an entire show on
Literally.
skin lightening because it's a problem. So I'm going to bring all three of you back and we can get to the bottom of it. Because even I've been criticized about my skin.
Bring
so,
me back.
Yeah, 100%. You guys are
love
awesome.
asking.
We'll just do a quick run around. Maybe give the audience just a little bit of what you're going to bring to In This Skin on February 20th, and also let the audience know how they can connect with you. Enrico, we'll begin with you, man.
You can expect a whole lot of energy from me, man. A whole lot of energy and just be ready to have a great time, man. See one of the greatest shows you'll ever see.
Amazing. And how can people connect with you on social?
All my social medias are Reeko Rieffe, so ReekoRieffe.
Okay. Zen, what about you?
Most of my music is always about women empowerment, so I intend to bring that to the Black women out here.
Okay, yes.
And you can check me out on all streaming platforms and on Instagram, Zenesoul, Zenesoul.
Amazing. And last but not least, Anika.
I sing about love. So we're going to make it specific. We're talking about Black love this coming show. And I'm Anika Marie, and I'm on Instagram at Anika B. Marie, ANIKA BMARIE.
Awesome. I want to thank all three of you for coming through New Theory Radio. This is a really awesome conversation. We're going to have to definitely continue it. Remember, In This Skin takes place on Thursday, February 20th at the Rose Theater in Brampton. It is presented by Brampton's very own. Shout out to Sade Waheed for hooking this up. And tickets are currently available. So go check out this wonderful show. It's the second year that they've done it. Last year, I think, was close to sold out, or if not, was sold out. So you do not want to miss this year's edition. We're going to take a quick commercial break here on New Theory Radio, and we'll be right back here on News Talk Saga 960. And we are back here on New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk Saga 960 AM. My name is Nav Nanwa. I am your host, and this is the show where we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. And another upcoming show that's going to be taking place at the Rose Theater is a wonderful comedic performance by a true Canadian, I would say, comedy legend. He is somebody who's been in various movies with the Farrelly brothers. He was in Harold and Kumar. He was in This Hour Has 22 Minutes. He's been a regular, I would say, in the comedy scene within the GTA and within Canada for quite some time. And I'm very honored to have him on the show to promote his upcoming show at the Rose Theater on February 22nd. It is Shaun Majumder is currently joining us. Shaun, thanks so much for making time for New Theory Radio.
It is my pleasure, man. It's great to be involved in anything Peel Region.
And you were saying that you have a Peel Region connection.
Absolutely. So a couple of connections. One being when I moved from Newfoundland, my dad was living in the south. My dad was actually first he was living in Port Credit way back when my parents divorced. I would always come up and visit. Well, I would always end up down in Port Credit. And then when my mom moved to Ontario with me and my sister, we moved to Clarkson. So I was in Clarkson, then I went to Hillside, then I went to Clarkson, played hockey with Clarkson. Not the high school, but with Clarkson, I played Red. Yeah. And then it was fun because I also know John Tavares played actually at Clarkson as well, which was I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. When I heard about that later, I was like, oh, I played on the same ice as John Tavares. So I love that. Along with a million other kids.
You're just gonna own it,
but
you have to own it. That's like me. Yeah. I went to the same high school as Russell Peters. It's like, did you go to at the same time? I'm like, no, but I did go to the same high school.
Did you ever meet his mom?
No, I haven't. I never met Mama Peters, but no, Russell Peters went to Turner Fenton Secondary, and that's where I went. Yep. So that's hilarious, man. That's awesome.
It used to be just J.A. Turner, wasn't it?
It was.
Turned into Turner Fenton.
Then there was like a merger between the two schools.
Very weird. Very weird. Because I only knew it as J.A. Turner. When I would play volleyball, I would play against J.A. Turner.
Really? Yeah, it's fascinating because it was J.A. Turner. I forgot what the first name of Fenton was. But then I remember eventually they came together and then they created the first high school campus. So when I was at high school, I used to tell people, hey, my high school is cooler than yours because mine's a campus. And they had no idea what that meant. But I ran with it.
Pretty cool, though. That sounds like American style, you know?
It definitely does.
In Brampton.
It definitely does. Another interesting story I wanted to tell you is I saw you perform at Yuck Yucks on Richmond Street. It was my sister Natasha. We were always big fans of you. Like I think seeing you on TV and seeing you do many different things and seeing you on CBC. Like we just had this conversation in the segment before when we were talking about an upcoming Black History Month concert that's taking place at the Rose. But just representation really matters. And I think as a kid, being someone who was a big fan of just watching TV all the time, seeing someone like you really resonated with us because it felt like we almost knew you because of just who you were and just because of what your last name was. And I remember we went to go check you out, and what I loved about your comedy set was, number one, you obviously talked about your background and talked about your family, but you also talked about this character that you I don't know if it was an alias, but was it Raj? And you used to play the sitar song. Was that the bit?
Well, yeah, well, I mean, I probably talked about how Raj was born, and Raj kind of came to me through I was actually with my very good friend Chris Clappenson, who was a marketing guy at YTV when I was working there, and he, YTV, some big corporate thing, Chorus Entertainment, they had tickets to. They had I guess it was the Rogers Open, whatever the Open was, the big tennis tournament up at York University. And so we went, and it was like 40 degrees Celsius in the afternoon watching this tennis match. And everybody was like on fire, sweating. And I remember myself and Chris just laughing, going, "Oh my God, what's it like for people in India who do, this color commentary if they're outside and they're doing cricket or something? Like, how hard must it be? It gets so hot." So anyway, and then I would do this character. I was like, okay, I think it was I pretended to be golf. It was golf.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, BJ Singh now getting ready to tee off. He hit the last one into the water, and I could use some water right about now. Jokes like that, stupid stuff. But we only did it as an audio thing, and then I remember I did it as a sketch down here in LA with a group. We were just kind of like trying to throw sketches up, and he said, "Dude, we want to see that guy. I want to see what that guy looks like." And then I ended up trying it with the sketch strip that we had called the Bob Room, and I just went out and I got all this glycerin and water, and I made them not just sweaty, but like turbo sweaty, like hyperhidrosis level, like
Coolio Gangster's Paradise sweaty.
Yeah, like way over the top with sweat. And anyway, that's what made me laugh. Like this guy who's sweating all the time, and because he's from India and it's just so hot there all the time, he's just internally always there's a combustion engine going on. So anyway, I started doing that character then, and that might be what I was talking about. I'm not sure if I repeated the sketch with the Calcutta Golf Open or anything like that, but yeah, maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, it was something that we totally loved. I remember when you brought it out, it was kind of cool, man, because again, I think at that time, and I think this wasn't around, like I had never, like I think this was way before Russell. I had seen anything to do with Russell. So again, it was just cool to see somebody talk about something that I could relate with, that I wasn't used to. Like again, and outside of my parents watching Ion Asia, like in the mornings on Saturdays, like that, you were like the closest thing to someone I could relate to that was like the same color as me, which was great, man. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's amazing how, definitely Russell was the front runner. He was about 5 years ahead of me doing stand-up. And it's funny because when I first started, there would be all these people getting me mixed up with Russell because I was talking a little bit about my brown side. Because my dad is from India. He's Bengali, and my dad and my mom, she was white. And so they're both no longer with us. But they are. But when they, when I would talk about the brown side, it was stuff that I had just been learning about because I grew up in Newfoundland. Yeah. And then when I moved to Ontario and I moved to Mississauga, my dad would take me to some Bengali festival stuff, and I was like, oh my, as a Newfoundlander, I was like, man, this is pretty wild. All these people here doing all these wild things,
Yeah.
eating all this crazy food. and I loved it. But I got to know my Indian heritage and my South Asian heritage later in life, and still to this day, I still want, to learn more and go back, and I have lots of family in India, and, it's amazing. But again, it's like, talking about your experience on stage, you do have an impact on, whoever it is, and then it was nice to see all kinds of brown comics starting to come up and speak their truth and not try to fit into something else. It's great. And now the diversity in Toronto's comedy scene is beautiful. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And so it's cool to see the evolution.
No, totally. Let's talk about Hate. So this is your new tour. You're bringing it to the Rose Theater. Love Hate, man. Yeah. You gotta love Hate. It's if you don't have haters, you're not doing anything right?
Yeah.
So the show itself is really talking about intolerance and prejudice, and again, you're obviously using your unrelenting humor to bring this to life. This week's show specifically, we are in sort of Black History Month, and I just brought on some artists that are going to be performing at a Black History Month showcase. After this segment, we are doing a segment with Anita Li from the Canadian Journalists of Color to talk about how there needs to be more diversity in newsrooms. But when it comes to comedy specifically, and to your point that you just brought up around the fact that it's really refreshing in Toronto to see just a plethora of different diverse comics out there that are hitting the circuit, that are getting opportunities via many different outlets. How would you describe sort of the conversations that we're seeing around intolerance and prejudice in the comedy world, especially when it comes to some things that don't involve necessarily racism, but involve cancel culture and some of these other topics that we're seeing bubbling up in the industry?
Yeah, man, that's really complex. The whole thing around, and I will say this: I'm pretty ignorant when it comes to, the current kind of zeitgeist of comedy culture, specifically comedy culture in, like, for example, on college campuses. I mean, I did a show the other night in Hermosa Beach, and these comics were sitting around when I walked in the room, and they were talking about they were doing a show, and they have at this university where they were performing, there was somebody standing right by the booth, sound booth, and they have been given the authority to shut the show down if the comedian talks about anything that was offensive to the university campus.
Wow.
And I was like, that is not real. I couldn't believe that was a real thing. And of course it is. It's much more prevalent than I thought. Now, this is a different conversation than, what my show is about. My show is about the general population hate and what's going on in the world with regards to, the fear of brown, the fear of different, the fear of the other, who perpetuates this, who are the victims, who are the perpetrators, is it all, American skinheads? Nope. There's plenty of Canadians who are freshly at it. There's plenty of Newfoundlanders who have hate in their heart. There's plenty of people out there. Everybody, even myself, I'm messed up. I've got hate in my heart. We all have elements of that. It is human. It's this. It's pretty hard to escape prejudice if you're a human being.
Yeah. No,
so
totally.
I go into those kinds of themes in my show. But, talking about that, my take on that is simply, I believe stand-up comedy should not have, any kind of, I really don't believe it should have boundaries. I think stand-up comedy is going to offend everybody. Mm-hmm. It's going to, there's a difference between hate speech and propaganda and promoting a point of view that is meant to bring harm to others. And then there's another side to the fact that sometimes comedy has to push boundaries and say things that upset people to bring to light, whether it's the kind of duality of how we think. There's so many levels to comedy. And if you take comedy and stand-up comedy specifically, literally all the time, you're never going to enjoy it, first of all. You're always going to be upset. You're always going to be pissed off. You're always going to be on the defensive. So for me, stand-up should be a place where people can say whatever they want, but they have to understand too, as a comic, there's going to be consequences.
Yeah.
And so, it is up to the individual artist to decide how far they want to take something. But they should be allowed to go to wherever they want and then know that, it is not all going to work out so well for them if they say something that maybe, whatever it is. But that's the nature of what it is to be a human being. So, and what it is to be stand-up.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that kind of touches on what you're talking about.
No, 100%. And I think that's crucial because these are conversations I've been having with a lot of comedians on the show is censorship, being able to say something now that's borderline offensive, but then it comes back a few years ago to bite you in the ass, and then people think that you can't be forgiven about it, and I think there's all these extremes. Like I remember really resonating with that Kevin Hart Netflix documentary that came out when I was following the journey that he had when he got removed as the Oscars host and feeling bad for him. Like, dude said something and it's all about comedy, and he did what he could to apologize, and I think people just really wanted him to pour out his heart and soul in every instance that he had. But again, he ended up losing probably one of the biggest gigs of his life because of it. And it's fascinating to see just the trend of where we're seeing comedy go, where people are putting up this shield of offense where they're just about ready to call you out on something as soon as you poke fun at a group of people or even an individual.
Absolutely.
I want
it's challenging, and I even talk about in my act, and I don't think it's popular. I can't tell if it is or what yet, but I have talked about the Kevin Hart situation where because of social media as being so vicious, and you can't. There's no forgiveness on social media anymore. There's no leniency whatsoever. And I use the example of Kevin Hart, and then I say also, like, if because Ellen DeGeneres came out in support of Kevin Hart, which I thought was amazing, and she kind of said to the LGBTQ community, "Hey guys, let's give him another chance." And the LGBTQ community destroyed her on Facebook and on social media. It was like, wait a minute, where's compassion? Where's the is somebody an evil person? Listen, this is not to forgive anybody who makes homophobic comments, but if you make homophobic comments or if you say anything that's sexist or transphobic or anything, I mean, you either make it a learning lesson, you make it a lesson that you can grow from, or you hold on to it, in which case you're probably not going to work much, or whatever. If you firmly believe that, I don't know what the situation is, but my point is there needs to be some room for compassion. There needs to be some room for forgiveness, and but there also needs to be accountability for what you say does matter. Words absolutely matter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I'm in all agreement with you, Shaun. I think that's important. I think ultimately it's really up to your interpretation, but I think people just need to have better sense of humors, if you ask me.
Just understand that if it's coming from humor versus literal, like direct. Humor can be backhanded. I mean, I remember I tweeted this thing. And it comes out in my show. I mean, I talk about all the tweets that I got after I did this one sketch called Beige Power on 22 Minutes. And, the hate tweets I got were amazing. And I'm bringing them and I'm sharing them with you all on stage. But it was just fascinating to see, like, when I started tweeting back at some of these idiots who were very serious about thinking, they were basically calling me out saying, why do you hate white people so much? Why do you want to promote white genocide?
Oh my God.
Like, you're not serious. You're not serious. So I would tweet things out like, hey, everybody do the backlash from the Beige Power video. Tomorrow's, white genocide, Christmas crafts and bake sale have to be moved to next week at an undisclosed location. But then there were people who'd see it and be like, see, I told you. It's like there's no hate and humor don't mix. Basically.
Yeah, they don't. They absolutely don't. And I think that's a great perspective that you bring, and I think that's going to be a huge conversation point maybe coming out of your show to anyone who's in attendance. I think you're going to get a lot of people thinking, which I'm super excited to see. Can we talk about your departure from This Hour Has 22 Minutes? Like, I remember
For sure.
seeing it on social media. I personally, I actually started like watching that show again when I saw you on it, because I thought you were such a great fit, and a lot of your skits actually were being shared online, which was great. And it was just one of those things where I'm like, hey, this show kind of relates to me, because I remember at the time growing up, I never really used to pay attention to it. But then as you kind of get in tune with the news and in tune with things that are happening around you, and you start growing up and become like a homeowner, and you start to vote, you start to pay attention to some of these parodies a lot more.
Right, yeah.
But all of a sudden, like, I remember it hit the news that you were leaving the show, and there was a lot of speculation, and you don't have to go into any of the speculation here, but for you at that time, like, are we happy with your legacy on that show, and do you like where you're progressing now, kind of getting back into the live circuit and getting things going? Was there anything that maybe you would have done differently? Because the thing that's sort of tough is really kind of looking at the Canadian industry as a whole and seeing the opportunities that are available for a lot of talent, and again, you being someone who is a visual minority, it was refreshing to see you on a show that's been predominantly not that for the longest time.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, no, it was, it's funny. If you're brown and you're from Newfoundland, you probably have a better chance of being on 22 Minutes, because now Trent McClellan's on there, and he's hilarious, and he's a brown guy from, who is a great story, by the way. I would recommend interviewing him anytime.
Totally.
He's amazing. But anyway, no, my departure from 22 Minutes is all out there, in terms of the whys, and there's lots of press reports and lots of interviews that I did about it. But, in a nutshell, it was just basically my creative sensibilities and the things that I wanted to do with the show, and with pieces that I had written, were not being kind of, supported, I think, by the showrunner that was working on the show at the time. And I don't know, I just felt like the show was losing its edge a little bit, and I was trying to push, the showrunner to go that direction, but, there was a bit of a power thing there, and, look, if you have an executive producer, who is in charge of the show, they do have the final say. But when you're on a show where you have so much talent, like comedic talent, on the show between the cast and then the writers in the writers' room, who are all working comics, who all have lived comedy, and then the showrunner has never performed comedy, doesn't really, he's not a comedian, he was more of a journalist. I just found that to be, he was a very good producer in terms of running the show. But when it came down to what was funny and what wasn't, I just felt like the door was closed to the input, really, from all the other talent that was on the show, and that was the biggest contention that I had, because I started seeing sketches that were being edited poorly. I felt like material was being left out. I felt like not the right jokes were, being put in the show. And this is my own personal thing. Other people may disagree, but it was just one of those things where I just think we had creative differences, and when it came time for me to renew my contract, the thing was I did not leave. They definitely chose to let me go, because it was weird. I still questioned the reasoning behind it. It was more about, the producer himself probably was like, I don't think Shaun should come back. Just because it's more of a headache for me than it is anything else.
Oh, wow.
But my intention was to make the show better, to make the show funnier, to make the show more relevant, and anyway, it kind of interferes, and so be it. But regarding my legacy on the show, I've loved the show, and it truly is a beautiful place to work, because you've got you get to work out all your skills on a show like that. You get to be a writer, you get to be a performer, you get to be an actor, you get to be an editor. You get to do everything. And like as a comedian, it's amazing. It's like going to university. You do all these different courses. It's incredible. So and it's a show that has had a huge impact on Canadian culture.
Yeah.
And I so I've always been honored. And I wish the show lasts forever, and people will come and go. And remember, it is just entertainment. You know what I mean? Like in the big picture. Now they got a daughter too. It's like, oh, dude, what really matters in life? So it was an amazing run. I'm so thankful to be on the show. And I will say this: for those of you who really want to get the true answers, you come to my show in Brampton, because I will be interviewing myself. I'm Skyping myself in, and Shaun's going to answer all of my tough questions about what really went down.
Now that's a hard sell. I love it. I want to see you interview yourself, and I think that'll be fantastic. Yep. And again, I think you have a lot to say, and I think that's going to leave a lot of the audience very satisfied.
We'll see what I have to say. We'll to my question.
Shaun, this has been awesome. You're truly a legend in the Canadian comedy world. I'm very honored for you to bless the mic here on New Theory Radio. If anybody wants to connect with you, or hey, do one last sell, we'll be there on February 22nd. But maybe let the listeners of Saga 960 AM know why they need to be there on February 22nd.
Bro, I love the. I'm just saying that because it's louder.
It works.
No, seriously, guy, for real, guy. No, but I'm really excited to come back. Last time I played Brampton, I think I was actually tickling these ideas to get the show started. This is when my last time I was at the Rose, I started like entertaining this idea around the hate theme, and so I'm really stoked. It's a show that's relevant. It's now, there's a lot of stuff I talk about. Nobody is safe in the show. I talk about America. I talk about Canada. I talk about Trudeau. I talk about Trump. And it's a lot of fun. And it's not your conventional show. There's music. There's video playback. There's a Skype interview with myself. So come on down. It's going to be great. And you can follow me at Shaun Majumder on the old Twitter box and the old Instagram box. And I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome, Shaun, and we're looking forward to it as well. Thanks so much for joining us. And man, we got to get you in studio. And we got to get Raj in studio too.
Oh yeah, no, he's currently working on he's actually employed as one of the builders of the wall. Down south. He's
busy. He's busy
about it, but he took a job. He's a bit of he just got his welder permit. So.
Oh my God, I love it. Thanks so much, Shaun, and best of luck next week.
All right, peace.
New Theory Radio.
And we are back here on New Theory Radio on News Talk Saga 960 AM. My name is Nav Nanwa. I am your host, and this is the show we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. I'm super excited to welcome to the show two individuals. One being somebody who is, I would say, the chairperson of the Canadian Journalists of Color here within the GTA. Someone who has an extensive experience in the world of journalism. I'm very honored to have her on the show, Anita Li. Anita, thanks so much for joining us here on New Theory Radio.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime. And then joining us via phone from Vancouver, from the Canadian I can't even talk. I'm going to edit that out. Canadian Association of Black Journalists. Nadia Stewart is on the line. Nadia, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Wanted to talk to the both of you about this call to action that recently came out around Canadian newsrooms and diversity, representation, and inclusion. Obviously, when you think about the last few years, this has been something that's been coming up quite a lot. One more immediate example I could probably bring up was probably the Canadian election that just took place, and especially when our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was accused of brownface. There was a lot of conversation around diversity within newsrooms, and even with the wonderful work that the Canadian journalists of color are doing. And I had the opportunity to go to a wonderful networking event that you held, Anita. So thanks so much for organizing that. And just seeing the amount of people that are in the room that are on the market looking to bring change to a lot of these institutions, it's quite surprising that we're still seeing these types of issues exist. So I'd love to just understand how this all came about and how the reception's been since this call to action has been delivered.
Yeah, sure. I will throw that to Nadia because she's been taking that question. You guys can also edit that out, by the way.
No worries. Yeah.
So we, Anita and I met shortly after Anita's group launched. So that was in October 2018. And Anita reached out to the CABJ at the time, and we finally connected in 2019, and the spring of 2019. And it wasn't until about the summer, just as conversations began happening between the two groups, that we realized, hey, we're still seeing some things, whether it's by way of personal experiences or experiences that we were hearing about through other journalists of color. And so we just felt like, this was a great time to release a document like this, one that does not call anyone out, but we are looking to call everyone in. We really wanted this to be a conversation around these key 7 points that look at actionable things that we can do in the industry to advance this conversation or advance change really around race and representation in the industry.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add to that is that during the summertime when we first connected, it was really interesting because as Nadia and I were discussing and laying down the groundwork for the calls to action, a lot of things started happening in Canadian media that kind of called attention to this even more. So I mean, this was prior to the summer, but Sonny Dillon, the former Globe and Mail reporter, he wrote this Medium post that went viral that talked about some of the microaggressions and racism they experienced at the Globe. And then there was a Vancouver Sun editorial that talked about how ethnic diversity is harmful, for which they apologized. And then obviously the brownface, blackface incident happened. And then there was a lot of criticism about how Canadian media handled that obviously controversy. So it just felt like there was more and more momentum towards this release. Essentially, it was just kind of like the perfect timing. And I'm glad you brought those examples up, because as somebody who, again, this radio show, spoiler alert, is not my full-time job, but for someone who's very passionate about doing this and really making content and being able to talk about things that are affecting, the city of Mississauga or the city of Brampton or even just the world on a regular basis, it can be quite discouraging when you see people who are doing this as a full-time job not getting the respect that they deserve or being not welcomed in certain areas. For someone like me who doesn't have experience being in a full newsroom, how would you describe the current environment of some of these newsrooms that really makes these issues apparent? So, Nadia, do you want to take that first, or do you want me to go for it?
Why don't you go first?
Okay. So my experience is, I guess, a little unorthodox for a lot of Canadian journalists. So the first half of my career was in Canadian establishment media. So I worked at places like The Star, The Globe, CBC, CTV. And the second half was at American digital media startups at like Mashville, Fusion, Complex, which is not a startup, but I was managing...
Big reader of Complex.
Complex is great. But it was... Basically, it was an owned and operated site that was like autonomous from Complex. So I've worked in a lot of startup environments. So it really, to me, it really depends on the nature of the newsroom. I've noticed a lot of differences between kind of more legacy newsrooms that have more, I guess, like rigid hierarchies and more of a resistance to innovation for various reasons, including just a lack of resources as well in Canadian media. But then compare that to startup media where it tends to be younger, tends to be a little more diverse, tends to be a little more innovative. And there's also distinctions between American media and Canadian media as well, because in the US, there's always been a public discourse around race in the US, right? Whereas Canada, we tend to tiptoe around it. We don't really address it directly, right? So I would say it really varies on the newsroom. Like it depends on the newsroom, so I wouldn't generalize. But in my experience, at certain organizations, some of the barriers that I've encountered included like whenever I wanted to pitch a story about a particular community. I'll give you one instance where I was at a legacy newspaper. I wanted to pitch a story about, racialized community or my community in particular, and I was told that our readers don't care about this story. But I'm a reader of this particular paper, and my community is also a reader of this particular paper. So it's like, my question is, how are they defining what that reader is? Like, who is that reader, right? Yeah. So it's kind of, I guess, to me, it's really about not understanding that Canada is really evolving in terms of its demographics. I mean, like, our major media center is in Toronto, and that's like 50% people of color, right? So there's just, you can't ignore how the country is changing, and you really, as journalists, it's a public service that we provide, and we really need to serve and reflect the communities, all communities across the country, right? So
yeah, no, I think that's a great way to put it. Nadia, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, just to echo what Anita said, I wouldn't want to generalize the environment in newsrooms across the country. I've definitely heard from journalists of color, Black journalists, who said that they've had good careers, and others who said that they've encountered challenges. I myself have had a good career, but I do see some of the challenges that journalists have encountered. One thing I will note is that in February 2018, shortly after the CABJ relaunched, we did a survey of Black journalists. We heard from 70 Black journalists across Canada, and over 80% of them said that they did not see themselves represented in management.
Wow.
And I think that actually is something that continues today. And if there was to be any big change, I think that would really impact, along the lines of what Anita was saying, the kinds of stories that we hear, and even, the environment in the newsroom. I do think that's something that could really move us forward. We do need to see more diversity in the leadership ranks.
Yeah, and I think I kind of go back because I think there's a couple of thoughts that come to mind here. Number one, I think it's very important to start seeing that representation, and I feel like in Toronto you do. Like City TV is a great example, I think, of showing the type of representation that does exist here within the city, and they continue to push that. Good to see the strides being made, but I think the interesting nugget there is the fact that in those management positions that there isn't really a lot representative, because it's one thing to be like, you know what, we want to be multicultural. Okay, we're going to start having an Asian news anchor at 6 p.m. every single day, or we're going to have one of our reporters be in a hijab and actually like be visible. And shouts to my good friend Janelle Massa, who's breaking down a bunch of barriers. She's so awesome. Yeah, she's cool. I worked with her at Rogers TV. But then, like, when you peel back the onion a bit, like, not seeing those same people in the same positions that are maybe behind the camera that are making some of those decisions is kind of scary.
That's really important. And the fact that that's a really good example you brought up, because I think a lot of people think, oh, I see my face reflected on screen, like through an anchor. But at the same time, although that's important, like you said, and I acknowledge those strides, that those people at the end of the day are not decision makers oftentimes, right? Unless they're like, for example, Peter Mansbridge was like editor, like the head of CBC in terms of like directing editorial content, and he was the main anchor. But that doesn't often happen. There's like higher up producers, they're executive producers, and if you look at the demographics as you go up, it gets way more homogenous.
Totally.
So it can't stop at just like, oh, I see like an ethnic name and a byline or an ethnic face on TV. It has to be much more far reaching, because at the end of the day, the decisions made about coverage, about hiring, always are under management.
Yeah, I know, it's definitely true. Nadia, how would you describe the environment on the West Coast? Like, obviously, Vancouver is a big city center similar to Toronto, and there's a lot of diversity out there. I have a lot of family out there, and I know that they've done, like, I know a couple of the news outlets have really tailored to specific communities, whether it's the Asian community or the South Asian community. But how would you describe your perspective from other parts of the country that are outside of Toronto? Because it's very easy for us to be stuck in this bubble over here.
I've worked in a few markets. So after leaving Toronto, I worked in Newfoundland, Edmonton, Calgary, and now Vancouver. So I've definitely had the opportunity to see Canada through the lens of these different communities. I can't say that I've ever been discouraged from reporting on the Black community or any kind of story about any other underrepresented community. For the most part, those stories have been welcomed in all of the newsrooms that I've worked in. But at end, I should say that as I've continued to move across the country now out west, this is probably the newsroom that I'm in now is probably the most diverse newsroom that I've been in terms of the reporter ranks. But again, right across the board, I do think it again comes back to that diversity in leadership, with more representation of those from these diverse communities. Over the years, I've seen the increase of women in leadership, but I'm still not seeing the increase of Black women, for example, in leadership, or South Asian women in leadership. So I'd love to see that diverse change where when we talk about the increase, it really represents everybody. I should be able to see everybody, just as I do in my reporting team. I should see it in other levels as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally true. I think we need to see that. And also when you think about positions of leadership, like you think about some of the other issues that exist when it comes to, a crime story that takes place. And if it involves a specific community, the types of photos that are used to depict victims or to depict perpetrators.
Totally.
A lot of that can be dictated by some of these people that are in some of these higher up positions in regards to the level of influence that they have. And I think you almost need this mandate to move forward where you need to have more representation to really change a lot of that. Like there's always the complaints around, hey, when a person who is white gets hit with a charge of date rape, it's always a photo of them smiling or a photo of them, graduating or something like that. Well, if it's somebody who lost their life and they're a young rapper in the city of Toronto, it's a photo of them throwing up a gang sign to kind of create that narrative. Like I think having more people in these positions of power will help change that narrative a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. It's really, you brought to mind a conversation that we had at my previous workplace, The Discourse, which is actually quite progressive when it comes to, it's a startup. So because I was in a leadership position there, I really tried to make sure that we embedded diversity and inclusion in a real way. Nice. Like walking the walk, not just playing lip service or tokenizing, which is obviously a problem here as well. But we had a discussion about basically this a story about an Indigenous community. And we had a discussion about whether we should actually include a photo of a powwow, because we were like, we don't want to reinforce stereotypes about these communities, right? But at the same time, the story did actually involve a powwow. So we had some interesting discussions about that, but these kind of conversations rarely happened at any other previous publication I was at. So it was actually a very rare thing to happen I believe in Canadian media, where there's actually discussion about everything from the way we frame things in the headlines to the photo that we use to the lead. And I'm very cognizant of that because I'm from Scarborough. And so Scarborough gets a really bad rap. Lots of reductive coverage. It's a very heavily racialized community too. So it's really focused on crime. And whenever we discuss things like, you notice how like whenever there's like a big crime incident in North York, they give the intersection, but in Scarborough, it's just like Scarborough. Yeah,
it's always Scarborough. They don't talk with the details. Yeah, exactly.
So that kind of thing I don't think there's like malice in the industry, but it's just like a lot of unconscious bias, lack of understanding or connection to communities on the ground. And so it's really about embedding yourself in these communities, consulting them, really listening to them so that they can tell you how this is how we want to be portrayed, but these are the things we're concerned about in terms of media coverage. This is how we think you can fill in the gaps. Like, let's collaborate. And I think media outlets should really be listening to communities far more.
Yeah, basically. No, I definitely agree. Nadia, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Just one point. As we're working towards this, seeing this change and getting beyond just this unconscious bias training. I think just a little bit more critical thinking, as we're talking about how we're covering racialized communities would go a long way. I realize that the news cycle that we're in these days moves very quickly, and people do not stop to consider the decisions that they're making. And so I think this return to critical thinking, why am I using that photo? You know, and would I use that photo if it was somebody else? These are, you know, this is beyond unconscious bias training at a simple level. This is just asking ourselves, why are we making the decisions that we're making?
Yeah. And I also want to really add and emphasize this. Stories about racialized communities, diverse communities, underrepresented communities are not just for those communities. Like a South Asian person could easily love consuming a story about a Black community, and like an Indigenous person would read a story about an Asian community. Like this country is pluralistic. We're multicultural. This is something we celebrate, so we should reflect that in the news. Like it's not an us versus them thing. It's not an either or. Like it's going to enrich us even more if we all, like, I consume lots of stories not from my particular community, and I think I'm better for it, basically.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because being a second generation child of immigrants, just like you and Nadia, are you as well? You don't have to be.
Yeah.
Okay. Represent. I grew up living in a diaspora full of other people, and to me, when it's so funny how I'll be fed certain South Asian content, like whether it's through SEO or just through anything, and people assume that I want to read it, but I was a big hip hop fan growing up. Like I read Complex magazine. Like a lot of the stuff I influence is not in the South Asian culture, yet I get tokenized to having to like that stuff. Yeah. And I think that's a crucial part that I think you bring up, Anita, is just the fact that as a second generation person, they just like to normalize the fact that, okay, well, this person will be, because they're from South Asian parents, they're going to be on this South Asian sort of trajectory of what South Asian people like.
Exactly.
Where they don't really understand what their surroundings are about. And I see a lot of parallels because of my experience working in the community when it comes to sort of arts and culture events, when it comes to, applying for funding for different things and how tokenized they can actually be in regards to, you need to do this type of an event and it needs to develop this type of multicultural standard and it needs to be rooted in this country. Like, it's weird being someone of second generation to see that.
I totally agree with that so much. Because I often say, okay, so this is my perspective. So just mine, not reflective necessarily of CJOC and definitely not CABJ, but my perspective on this is that there's a lot of media that's targeted to all Canadians, broadly, right? And then there's ethnic media that are from your parents and my parents' generation. So my mother and father have read Ming Pao News, and it's in Chinese, or they they watch Omni. But neither of those really reflect the experience of second gen children of immigrants, because we are so growing up in Scarborough. I had friends of all types, right? So I was influenced by tons of cultures. And so it just felt so limiting, because I'm just I don't relate to that, what my parents are watching, but I also don't necessarily see myself reflected in a lot of Canadian media. So I was where's that little slice of pie for me? You know what I mean?
I used to push when I was at Rogers TV, and then Omni slowly started producing shows out of our studio in Mississauga. I remember going to my station manager and being like, can we do a second generation South Asian show? Because sure, there's somebody who's speaking very eloquently in Punjabi or Hindi in regards to the news, but that's still targeting my parents' generation, which even then, when my parents came to Canada, there was a little bit of a simulation that they wanted to get in tune with. They didn't want to just come to Canada to see stuff that they saw when back in India. They wanted to be exposed to other cultures, other communities.
Yeah, totally.
And it's just interesting, the role that media plays in all of that.
It's
very fascinating. We unfortunately have to conclude this segment, but just quickly before we end, maybe Nadia or Anita, either or, maybe talk about what are some of the next steps after this call to action. It was very powerful, very well written. I urge everyone to check it out. We'll throw it in the podcast description, and we'll be sure to share it. But what are some of the next steps that you're hoping to see with this call to action? And is there anything that we can do to further the conversation?
Nadia, you can go for that.
Yeah, sure. What we're really focused on for the CABJ, and I believe as well for CJOC, are partnerships that look at the actionable things that we're talking about in the call to action. So we would love to work with like-minded organizations who want to move forward, and so we're open to that. We have been having conversations. I know Anita has been having quite a few conversations And so we are, moving along that vein for the CABJ. We just launched Zenesoul Noir, which is a program for Black youth in Halifax who want to pursue journalism.
Nice.
Once that takes place in 2 weeks, we're looking at how we can move this onto a national level. We'll be hosting an event next week. I was flying in from Vancouver to Toronto for an event on Wednesday the 19th for Black media professionals in Toronto, where we'll talk about the vision for the CABJ, some of the things that we've been working on, and some of the things that we'd like to work on as we talk to Black journalists and better understand their needs. So I think in the meantime, this is really about amplification, which is, what this interview does help with. Anything that you can do in terms of, pushing this message forward and drawing people into that conversation helps.
Awesome. That's great, Anita.
Nadia said it perfectly. The only thing I'd add is or really emphasize is that we put out these calls to action to continue the conversation, but really it's not just about lip service. It's not just about talk.
Yeah.
We want to walk the walk. These are meant to be calls to action. I want to emphasize the word action. We definitely want to make these a reality. And so I really just want to appeal to everyone, not just journalists of all backgrounds, members of the Canadian public. If you want to see more diverse coverage that's truly reflective of all Canadians, then please read these calls to action. Please share them. If you know a journalist, if you know somebody in the media industry, tap them on the shoulder and be like, hey, send this off to management. Just talk about it as much as possible because it's so important for so many different reasons.
Awesome. No, I want to thank the both of you for joining us. Forgot to bring you both back again because I think we can do a whole episode on a lot of these topics. But this was awesome. Thanks, Anita. Thanks, Nadia, for joining us. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we'll be right back here on New Theory Radio on News Talk, Saga 960 AM.
Theory Radio.
And we are back here on New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk, Saga 960 AM. My name is Nav Nanwa, and I am your host. And this is the show where we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. A special thanks to all of the wonderful guests that joined us this week. Shouts to Anika Marie, Zenesoul and Reeko Rieffe. Go check them out this coming Thursday at the Rose Theater for the In This Skin Black History Month concert being presented by Brampton's very own, a wonderful organization that's doing their best right now to really put on local talent. Shouts to my good friend Sade Waheed. We got to get you on the show ASAP. And then big thank you again to Shaun Majumder, who also has a show at the Rose Theater on February 22nd, just a few days after. A jam-packed schedule at the Rose. Shouts to the Rose and their wonderful programming. Shaun also has a new podcast that has to do with fatherhood. It is called The Movie Womb, so go check that out. We'll have the link to that podcast within our own podcast description. As well, I did announce earlier in the show that we will be giving away a pair of tickets to Shaun's show, so keep it locked to New Theory Radio, which is at New Theory Radio on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are going to be running a contest, so be on the lookout for that. And you can find yourself attending the show that's taking place at the Rose next Saturday, and we will have more details on how you can enter that contest by checking us out on social media. And last but not least, big shout outs to Anita Li and Nadia Stewart for also joining us to talk about diversity in newsrooms and their call to action. Go check it out. We will also include a link to that in our podcast description. And feel free to send that one out. We need to make sure that our newsrooms are diverse and that all of the coverage that you see within Canadian media is equal and fair. And that's a wrap for this week's episode. Again, thank you so much for tuning in on this Family Day long weekend. Like I mentioned earlier, if you want to connect with New Theory Radio, it's at New Theory Radio on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you want to connect with me, it's at Nav Nanwa on Instagram, at Nnanwa on Twitter. Please check out our wonderful photographers' social media as well. I'm at Nanwa. It's at colorblindphotography_ on Instagram. Special thanks to Soho Innovation Lab in downtown Toronto for allowing us to use their space this past week to record this week's episode. You can check them out on social media if you simply search Soho Innovation. And yes, shouts to Dusty Loops for making our theme song, which you can hear each and every week. It is at Dusty Loops across all platforms as well. And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in, and you will hear all of us next time. Peace.